Good evening, y'all. We're here tonight to get you ready on the True North Sports Talk podcast for round 2 of the 2025 Stanley Cup playoffs. They kick off in about an hour here, and we are from 5 teams. We are now down to 3 Canadian teams. We lost the Montreal Canadiens and we lost the Ottawa Senators, as the Senators were in the first round with the Maple Leafs. So we have the Leafs going on to the next round. We had Edmonton move on to the next round, getting past the Kings. And last night, my goodness, we had a barn burner. It was a double overtime that came down to the last 2 minutes. The Edmonton Oilers, the Winnipeg Jets scored twice in the last 2 minutes, and they were able to get into the second round in double overtime. The puck tipped off Lowry's stick after it hit a Blues defenseman, and we are looking at trying to break a 32-year drought for Canadian sports teams. Not sports teams, but NHL teams getting or winning the Stanley Cup. Now, to recap the first round just a little bit here, we had the Winnipeg Jets. They were the President's Trophy winner with 116 points this year. They barely, as we mentioned, escaped the St. Louis Blues, and it was a thrilling game last night. 7-game series. It was hard fought each and every game, and as I said, last night we were up late into double overtime, and it seemed like maybe just a little bit the Blues came out too hard too early, and their defense was tested early and often, and Hellebuck did what Hellebuck does. He showed up in the big games. This was a thing where it was almost like the Four Nations again. It was Hellebuck and Binnington and who was going to win, and it almost ended up the same way as the Four Nations, with Binnington coming out on top the way Canada did at the Four Nations. However, a bit of redemption on Hellebuck's side at the right time for his team. They were able to pull it back out and get ready for the next round. They have to reset quick. They have Dallas in the next round. It's going to be a very similar series, I would say, to what they faced in the first round. Now, let's take a quick look at the Edmonton Oilers here. They played the Los Angeles Kings. They had a 6-game series, winning 4-2. This series, they started out sort of with a dud. They allowed the Kings to go up 2-0. In the series, it was a 6-5 win in Game 1 and a 6-2 win in Game 2. And it was looking bleak for Edmonton fans. And if it wasn't for Leon Draisaitl's overtime winner in Game 4, this one may have gone in a bit of a different direction. And Connor McDavid's 11 points, so he had 2 goals and 9 assists in the series. So those 2 guys, your big players, they showed up at the right time. Let's take a look at the Battle of Ontario. We are looking at the Toronto Maple Leafs and Ottawa Senators, another 6-game series. This was a hard-fought series. Toronto came out 4-2 on top. Austin Matthews and the core 4 of Marner, Nylander, and Tavares, they all stepped up at the right times. Matthews had 2 assists in Game 1's 6-2 win, and it was their first series win overall since 2023. A rare bright spot, and as mentioned in some earlier videos, they are 2-13 when trying to close out a series. So that's the three that moved on. And you had the Montreal Canadiens. They went down to Washington in the first round. And so that was the fifth team out of the five Canadian teams. And so that wasn't as much of a fight as we may have thought going on there, but it is what it is. Vancouver, they missed the playoffs altogether. Calgary, they missed the playoffs altogether. And that's the rundown for the Canadian teams. A bit of a recap there. All right. So Winnipeg, Edmonton, and Toronto, they are now in tough in the next round. They have a tough sledding ahead. They are trying to become the first team since Montreal in 1993 to win the Stanley Cup. So, let's get to the next round and set this up. Winnipeg is now facing the Dallas Stars, and the question is, can they find consistency? The Jets face a Stars team that advanced after a 7-game battle with Colorado, so these are two battle-tested teams. And it was a 4-3 clinching Game 7 with a 4-2 victory. And so this is a second-round playoff meeting between these two teams. 2 years in a row, Dallas won in 6 games in 2024. So Winnipeg's looking for a bit of payback here, and they're going to be in tough. The Jets' first round, especially last night, their defense was characterized as Swiss cheese. They have Kyle Connor. Hopefully Mark Scheifele will be back. They both had big series in the first series. Hellebuck's 166 goals against average. That kept them alive. And I know they pulled him a couple of times, but it wasn't always Connor Hellebuck's issue there. It was a lot of times the team in front of him. The Jets' depth will be on display. They had 14 players with at least one regular season goal, and so they will have that going forward and going into the game. They have a lot of players who can reach their potential. They have occasionally, sadly, some mental lapses on defense, as we mentioned, and Hellebuck was a little bit shaky at times and needs to prove himself here in the playoffs. So he can be the difference maker. We've seen that. He's been in big games before, as we mentioned, with the Four Nations Cup. So he needs to bring that experience to this series. If not, this is going to be a hard-fought series. They thought that the Blues were rough and tough. Well, guess what? The Dallas Stars aren't going to be a whole lot different. So the Stars' threat, they rallied in Game 7. Mikko Ratanen's third period hat-trick, though the recap on ESPN there, it mistakenly attributes this to Rantanen, who plays for Colorado, likely a reporting error, but Dallas's team, they had that third period there. They have contribution, they have depth. The Stars had 106 points and a balanced attack, and they were second in their division. So this makes them a very tough opponent for the Winnipeg Jets. Keys to victory for the Jets, they need to tighten up their defense in front of Hellebuck, and they need to avoid the high-scoring games that plague them against the Blues. The question will be, as it was against the Blues, can they handle Dallas's physicality, secondary scoring, and the secondary scoring, which overwhelmed Colorado? As the top seed, the Jets carry an immense amount of pressure to prove that their President's Trophy win wasn't a fluke. Fans in Winnipeg are buzzing after tonight's Game 7 win, but some predict that the Stars could take this series if the Jets don't find that consistency that they were known for in the regular season. Alright guys, let's take a look here at the Edmonton Oilers and the Vegas Golden Knights. It's a Western Conference showdown, and let's see, the Oilers are taking on a Vegas team here, the Knights, who beat Minnesota in a 4-2 series, so they had a 6-game series. And this series starts on May 6th with Game 1 in Vegas. Edmonton has the historical edge, winning 8 of 10 playoff series against Vegas, including last year's first round in 5 games. So the Oilers have a bit of a psychological advantage here. And so let's see how Edmonton stacks up against this Vegas Golden Knights team. Obviously their strengths, they have one of the best players in the world with McDavid. Draisaitl, they were unstoppable in the first round once they got going. McDavid's 11 points led the team. Draisaitl's Game 4 OT winner, that shifted the momentum in that series and really set it towards the Edmonton Oilers. Now the power play was lethal at 45%, which was 9 for 20, and their penalty kill, which is super important, went 12 for 12, a combined 145% efficiency, and that's nearly unheard of in the NHL. So what that means for Vegas is they had better stay out of the box, one, and they need to make sure that they press that penalty kill. So in games 1 and 2, the Oilers came out real slow. They struggled out of the gate, and they need to avoid that, the early pressure coming from the Vegas Golden Knights. And they have some injuries to deal with that have really caused the depth to be a question with Edmonton, and so there will be guys that need to step up and just take those guys' place and fill in the scoring gaps that they have. As always with Edmonton is their question on the back end. They got to keep that puck from getting to the goalie, because their goaltending has always been a question. And I mentioned this at the beginning of the playoffs when talking about the Edmonton Oilers, is that Stuart Skinner is at best a second or third string on some of the other teams that are in the playoffs here. So he has to come up big during this series. He's got to stand on his head a little bit, and having been to the Stanley Cup Finals with this team, he was, as from what I remember, backing up Markstrom, and he doesn't have that safety net right now. So his goaltending, while improved, is still that huge question mark on this Edmonton Oilers team. So these guys got to pull out the grit and the sandpaper. They have a Vegas team that's hungry, that's coming for them. They really need to step up their game, and they really need to make sure that they are playing a good, clean, fast brand of hockey that they are known for. And so they just have to really, really make sure that this is not a beginning part of that Kings series here. Now, the Golden Knights side of things, they were in the Pacific Division as the top seed with 105 points, and has the Jack Eichel, who had 1 goal and 4 assists in the first round, and they have Thomas Hertl, who had 3 goals and 2 assists, leading the charge. So these are some guys that they're going to have to make sure they're on their P's and Q's when dealing with. And their defensive structure and their goaltending with Darcy Kumper had a career best season this year. So he's on fire right now, and he's going to make it real tough on McDavid and Draisaitl. And so they have to be at the top of their game, as always, in order to beat this Vegas team. I could see this series going 6 or 7 games. It's going to be a real tough sled here. Edmonton must maintain their special teams dominance and get more from their supporting cast. As an example, from Zach Hyman, who was very quiet in the first round. So these are the keys. And can Skinner hold up against the Vegas onslaught? And this is the thing, that Vegas team is going to have a relentless forecheck. They're going to be on the puck, and they're going to be heavy on the puck. So we got to keep this, or at least the Oilers have to keep them at bay. The Oilers are coming off a Game 7 loss in the 2024 finals and are hoping that they can recapture that magic that took them to the finals last year. So this is going to be a real tough series. We will see how they do. And prediction time, it's hard. We're going to say Oilers in 6. But as we mentioned, they got to stand up and be strong in front of Skinner. McDavid's got to do McDavid things. And they need that rough and tough to combat a strong, hard forechecking Vegas team. Alright, so that's the first 2 Canadian teams. Let's get into the nuts and bolts here. We're getting into Toronto Maple Leafs against the Florida Panthers. Now this is going to be a very, very difficult series for both teams, I would imagine. The Leafs are looking for some redemption because it was the Florida Panthers who put them out last year en route to beating the Oilers in the Stanley Cup. So is it redemption for the Leafs, or like it was a couple of years with the Boston Bruins, is it a repeat from last year? So the Leafs are facing the defending Cup champs here. This is where it's going to get real tough sledding. This team hits hard. They forecheck hard. This game is coming up in about half an hour here. And hopefully I can get this out to you guys before that game starts. And it's a rematch from last year's second round. And Florida won that in 5 games. So let's see if the Leafs can either win it or push them even further. Now the Panthers beat Tampa Bay 4-1 in the first round. So they're a rested team and they're going to have a lot of energy. They're going to hit hard, forecheck hard, and they're going to make life hell for Riley and Ekman Larson and all those guys on the back end. They're going to have to play a rugged brand of hockey here. And it's going to be tough. The forwards are going to have a tough time because the defense are going to be putting pressure on them, jumping into the rush, jumping into the play. So the forwards are going to really have to be on their game. Guys like Nylander and sometimes Marner and Tavares that may not be used to playing in the defensive end, they're really going to have to pitch in and help. Robertson and Benoit and some of the third and fourth line guys that are used to playing a bit more of a rugged style, they're going to have to step up big. So we have the core 4, Marner a goal and 2 assists in game 1. You had Nylander with 3 goals and 6 assists in the series. And you had Matthews doing Matthews things. He had power play goal in game 1. showed up, and Craig Berube's defensive system, with additions like Chris Tanev, he's going to block a lot of shots in this series. Jake McCabe, they tightened up their play. And here's the big interesting one, in a way, is last year's backup to Sergei Bobrovsky was Anthony Stolarz. And he's the number one in Toronto. So he's going to be looking to prove that he can take a team to that next level the way they did last year in Florida. So look for a big series out of Stolarz, and they're going to have to do a real good job of standing up in front of him. They got to stay out of the box. They can't be taking stupid penalties because Florida's going to capitalize on that. Now, during the regular season, the Leafs had the better record. But the way that Florida plays, that hard brand of hockey, forechecking and pressing and just putting pressure on the defense to make smart and wise plays, that can at times have lulls because it's tiring even for the guys putting the pressure on. So let's see how that goes here. The Leafs have a history that they're looking to get that monkey off their back. As we said, we mentioned earlier, 2-13 in closeout games. There's over 40 years of heartache for Leaf fans that they are trying to overcome in this series. So even though they might sound or feel like the underdog here, there's an immense amount of pressure coming from Canada on the Toronto Maple Leafs, and specifically Ontario, to overcome all these things. Their penalty kill has struggled at times against Ottawa, so that's going to be a point of emphasis, or at least it should be, for Craig Berube preparing for this series, because if that hard checking offense gets a man advantage, that's going to be even tougher for Morgan Rielly and company on the back end there. Guys like Morgan Rielly, Ekman Larsson, they're going to have to get down and dirty and block a lot of shots in this series, because those pucks are going to be flying at the net from every which way with this Florida team. And I was saying to one of the guys today is that they went from one Tkachuk brother, now they're playing the next one, and that's the thing, is those two boys, doesn't matter what team they're on, those guys and their coaching staffs, just hard-nosed, hard brand of hockey. Because even back when they were playing Ottawa, Travis Green, he was a gritty, hard-nosed player when he played here in Toronto and other places throughout his career. So this is the thing, you got to be on your toes, because this Panthers team, they're a legit threat to contend for the title again this year. And they got Sam Reinhart, 2 goals, 4 assists in the first round. You got to be on your toes with him around. As we mentioned, you got Matthew Tkachuk in this round, you had Brady in the first round, and these guys had that experience last year. And so this is the thing, they've been to the promised land that the Leafs are trying to get to. They know what it takes to get there, and they are willing and able, and they fight for each other on that Florida team. So this is the thing, Toronto has to step up their physical game. They have to keep that puck from getting through their line of defense to Stolarz. And they're going to need Stolarz to bring his A game in this series. So the keys to victory for Toronto, they need to match Florida's physicality. They need Stolarz to steal games as much as they can. And they have to keep on Berube's low-risk style, and they got to make sure that they're staying home, they're taking care of the back end. And one of the biggest questions is, can that core 4 forwards, Matthews, Nylander, Marner, Tavares, will they hold up to the beating that they are about to take? And so that's the thing, is they really have to put their best foot forward at all times. One thing we know about Florida, they don't take a shift off. So this is the thing, is that this team under Berube has played differently. But that first round, we saw them get by Ottawa, but it wasn't as dominant and as clean as it should have been. And so here's the thing, as fans of the Maple Leafs, you're saying, okay, yes, we got past an Ottawa team that maybe most pundits wouldn't have thought were even gonna be in the playoffs this year. And they went 6 games with that team. That should have never happened. Toronto should have squashed them the same way that Florida did to Tampa Bay, and we could have had the second round start by now. So we'll see which Toronto team is going to show up here. So this is the thing. Wrapping up here, getting to the end of our setting the table, as it were, for the second round of the playoffs here. And in the Eastern Conference, we also have Washington taking on Carolina. That's going to be a real interesting series to keep an eye on, because the winner of that series goes against the winner of Toronto, Florida. And we'll see. Will the Capitals slide by? Or is Carolina the buzzsaw they've been all year? And are they going to send Alex Ovechkin either into retirement or just to the golf course? So that's the thing, is that was the other series that went in the first round there. And so we'll see. It's going to be an interesting second round. We'll see who comes out on top. And we're looking at these Canadian teams. We're down to 3. We'll see how many make it into the next round. It would be real nice to see Toronto play either Washington or Carolina. It'd be nice to see Winnipeg, Edmonton playing against each other, make it an all-Canadian Stanley Cup, but we're getting way ahead of ourselves here. When it comes to Edmonton and Vegas, it's real hard to say. It's going to be a tough series. We're going to see what Edmonton's really made of this year. We're going to see whether they're able to get by Vegas, whether they can handle the pressure that Vegas is going to bring to them. And it's going to be a tough series. We will see who comes out on top, how long this series goes for, and if Edmonton can get this over quick, they'll have a good rest. Winnipeg, Dallas. Winnipeg, Dallas. That's going to be another rough series in the West. I could see that one going 7 games. That's going to be a real interesting matchup, because again, Dallas is a very physical team. They put a lot of pressure on the back end, and we'll see. Winnipeg's top defenseman last night left that game early, so hopefully he has enough time to recover and get back, because without him, that's going to make things even tougher. Now, when they were talking to Coach Arnell last night in Winnipeg, he said the attitude in that Winnipeg dressing room has always been just next man up. So that bodes well for the next guy stepping in, that, hey, you know what, this is my time to shine. We're in the playoffs here, and let's make some hay for next year. So, yeah, we'll see. I think we're looking at 6 and 7 game series out west for this next series. We'll see. In the East, I think that Carolina is the real deal. I'm not sure that's going to be a real long series between Washington and Carolina. I'm thinking 5, maybe 6 games in that series. And then you have the Leafs and Florida. Last year, Florida kind of spanked them a little bit. It was 4-1. It was only a 5-game series. I think this year, we're looking at 7 games. I'm hoping the Leafs learn something. They have a stronger goaltender and goaltending tandem than they had last year. So hopefully that bodes well for the Leafs, for those of you in Canada and in Leafland. All right, let's see, guys. Let me get to the next part here. So basically, guys, we're at the end of our time here. Hope you're all ready for round number 2. We are getting to that point. No team has won since 1993. So let's see if we can bring it home this year. So tune into the games. Most of them or all of them will be on Sportsnet, Sportsnet Plus. Follow along with us here at True North Sports Talk. Let us know what your predictions are, and will this be the year that Canada finally brings the cup home? Let's find out together. Subscribe to the channel at Redline Rush, and subscribe to the podcast at True North Sports Talk.